Hello and welcome to Unspooled. Today we're doing the second installment of our monthly movie review roundup. Of course, there are two versions of this series that run somewhat simultaneously. There's, of course, the one where I go through everything I happen to watch within a month version of this, which is a video format, unlike this, which is pure audio. Of course, those run now every 2 weeks. Every month. So typically on Friday nights or Sunday nights is when those run live. Usually around 11 Eastern or so is when they start usually. And then, of course, this version, which is the audio-only version that we do all the things you want to review, which these are not that you saw within the last month. Sometimes that is the case, but usually not. It's just stuff you've seen that you have reviews written up of from whenever that we haven't talked about before. So this, of course, runs an hour, and I'll set my timer, and however many we get through in an hour is how many we get through.
Okay. I start off tonight, with Baby Driver from last year. This is a pretty good movie. I gave it an 84 out of 100. There's the Baby Driver is not a driver that is a baby, technically a baby. They do call him baby because he's young looking and all, but this is a heist movie that is, pretty decent. The soundtrack is awesome in my estimation. And the driving by the said Baby Driver is incredible, and sometimes so incredible that it's really unrealistic. This is Atlanta. He drives on both sides of the street. He makes turns into opposite lanes, always knowing like there's no cars in the incorrect lane, etc. I just don't see that happening, honestly. But and at the end, it was nice, honestly, to see that the baby. I don't want to give spoilers away, but you know, the Baby Driver was sentenced to be in prison in the end. You know, just that. You know, hey, you don't always get away with crime. So. And I was really confused with his recording. It seemed to be every conversation. I'm not sure how he recorded it. I mean, maybe his earbuds, maybe he wasn't really listening to music, but he was actually recording the conversations. He recorded them, and it seemed to be without any outside noises. Some bad things like that, but overall, Jamie Foxx, he plays his character very well, I thought. And I was honestly not really sold on Kevin Spacey as the super bad crime boss. Okay, that's it for Baby Driver for me.
All right, I'll briefly mention I haven't gotten to talk about this one since our Best of the Year show from last year. Since rewatched it again, it's not bad by any means, but it's not nearly as good on a rewatch because a lot of the first like 30, 40 minutes is basically pointless at that point. On a rewatch, it's like none of this matters. Okay, whatever. But, you know, like a typical Edgar Wright film, this pushes its style over its storytelling substance, you know, its visual style, its artistic style. It's pushing that over its substance, which is what Edgar Wright typically likes to do. It works. You know, the action is well done. The fact that basically Edgar Wright uses his own score as a character in the film, that's one you notice on a rewatch too, that basically every single action in the movie is timed up perfectly with whatever sound is going on the score track. It's perfectly aligned. And then apparently you didn't notice like the whole bit of he has a tape recorder in his jacket pocket the entire time. Like, that's an integral plot point for about 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. I must have missed that.
To explain that, overall, the cast is very solid here. You know, John Hamm is terrific. The rest are generally fine. My big issue beyond the whole, it doesn't really hold up on a rewatch part, is just that still the romance subplot really doesn't work at all here. Ansel Elgort and the chick have like no chemistry whatsoever, and it doesn't really work. Other than that, it's fine, but nothing super special to me, at least.
Okay, like I said, I gave it 84 out of 100. My next movie up for tonight is Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle. This was also last year. And this one, I gave it 85 out of 100. So I liked it just a hair better than Baby Driver. This is a sequel to the 1980s Jumanji, maybe. And I didn't know how they were really going to do a sequel to the original Jumanji, but I think they've worked it out. They did it it was very slick, and it, to me, was done quite well. There are some problems, of course, with the sequel when you compare it to that original, but you know, a lot of sequels aren't done 20 years after the original. And I would think most sequels done 20 years after the original will have some problems. This time, the board game that Alan Parrish, he dropped it over the bridge in the first one, is found in the sand. And one of the players, he gets sent to Jumanji, and then 20 years later, a video game somehow as their avatars in the game. Yes. I thought it was a good way to have a sequel. We get to see the jungle where Alan Parrish spent like 30 years of his time, and they made it really good. Alan Parrish even carved his initials, you know, in a tree, and we got to see that. The plot was pretty thin. You know, the actors were decent. They played off each other quite well, I thought. The video game aspects are done quite well. We get non-playing characters. We get cutscenes. We got 3 lives. You know, we were missing save points, though, but when you died, you just came back to where you were, as long as you had any lives left. So I thought it was a very good sequel, and definitely I recommend it.
This is one I talked about in, I think, the April video. So the very short version of this was awful. It's an unfunny, absolute flaming heap of garbage to sit through. You know, every single character here is a complete two-dimensional stereotype of anything. You have, of course, the black football player who's stupid, the nerdy, slightly Indian-looking guy who's very smart, the teenage chick who doesn't care about anything, man, the other teenage chick who only cares about her social media account. You know, so none of the characters have any depth to them. Kevin Hart continues his streak of being one of the worst comedic actors in all of Hollywood, and for some reason he gets roles comedically. For some reason, Jack Black is awful here, and everything is just so painful to watch here. The plot barely makes sense, and the video game aspect really makes no sense either whatsoever. Because assumingly you're running on like 1985 video game, which I don't understand why, you know, a nerdy kid who plays a lot of games would know how this one in particular works. Because a lot of things they bring up, like 3 lives, that's not a thing. Like, that is not a system used since like 1990. Like no game uses this life system. How is that your point? Like, how is that the whole way this game works? I don't get any of that, how any of that's supposed to work. And this thing is just so boring, so unfunny, and just an absolute flaming pile of garbage. Do not bother.
Okay.
Unless you're putting together a big giant roll of torture footage, this should be in there. Other than that, do not bother unless you're putting together something to torture someone with. Then this is a good very good. This should be taught in classes of film school of how to torture an audience. This should be a prime teaching tool in film school for that, if that is for some reason a topic. Anywho.
Okay, I gave it, like I said, an 85 out of 100. My next one, also from last year, Coco, the animated from Disney or Pixar, the animated one. I forget who it's from. Sorry.
Pixar.
Yes, I gave this 94 out of 100. So quite a big jump. This one we have an aspiring musician, Miguel, but his family has a ban on music, so trying to be an aspiring musician is really tough in that family, I would assume. But he enters the land of the dead to find his great-great-grandfather, who was a legendary singer. This is a fantastic movie, very well done. The animation, very good. The attention to detail, just unbelievable. Wow, this one, we saw it at the cinema, at the theater, and
say we in Britain.
Yeah, we saw it at the cinema.
Awesome! I can try out my Cockney accent. This will be bad.
Well, it's Regal Cinemas. There were times it was like, I really want to pause this, to take it all in, to look at the lights and the background and see everything that they did. But obviously it's a Pixar. Yeah, I got it right here. It's a Pixar movie. You can spot other Pixar characters throughout the film. I couldn't believe the detail on Coco herself. The animation with her wrinkles and her white hairs, the detail of her clothes. I mean, the animation is just unbelievable. So the plot is, pretty predictable. There's a small twist at the end, but the movie does great at keeping you entertained throughout. And Anthony Gonzalez as Miguel, I believe, has a great future in voice acting. He did really good. This is a movie I think you would remember well, way after watching it. So certainly deserves more than one watching, and I gave it a 94.
This is another one I haven't talked about since our best of the year list from last year. This is, I'd say rivals Pixar's finest work, right up there with Wall-E. As this is a truly different Pixar movie with a rather unusual story, one you're not going to be able to predict too well on a first viewing. And this is truly more so than just a film. This is more so, for Pixar at least, as their best work is. This is a stunning exploration of both family as well as artistry that is very profound for quote-unquote kids film. Every single minute of this is terrific, from the heartwarming ending to the tearjerker scene just about 5 minutes before it. The idea of the afterlife as presented in this film is a very interesting concept, as it posits a scenario in which people live on as spirits until they're forgotten in the real world. So you don't just die once, you die twice. And it kind of brings up this idea that we hear like Tywin Lannister go on and on and on about in Game of Thrones of legacy and family and what does it mean to be a part of a family and how is this very important. And that's what this whole movie's about. There's also some class commentary in here, from the portrayal of Ernesto de la Cruz as basically a godlike, almost Christ allegory in the afterlife, who resides in a lavish mansion, has his own private security force, even in the afterlife. And it's kind of telling us that the idea of wealth and success lives on permanently after your death through, obviously, the legacy you leave as a very rich individual. This posits a lot of very interesting ideas and is wonderfully told and hits a lot of terrific emotional beats that do work on a rewatch. I can guarantee you the emotional beats work. The animation is beautiful, as you know, it's Pixar, of course, the animation is going to look great. So all in all, high recommend, and can't wait to talk about that one again later in a month.
Okay. And as I said, I gave it a 94 out of 100. Next up, pretty recent movie, Avengers: Infinity War. I gave this a low score of 92 out of 100. Yes, this movie, I think everyone in the world's already seen it. It's loaded with characters from the MCU, of course. It's loaded with action, loaded with humor. It does have a few flat parts that the movie's 2.5 hours. It's a bit too long for my taste, but it is filled with lots and lots of action. The CGI is, of course, well done. And you can see where the $300 million budget went. It wasn't wasted. This is a really good movie. Yeah, the ending was kind of confusing to me, but it's like, well, do they really kill off all these characters? I shouldn't give you the spoilers like that, but I'm sure the characters will all make comebacks. I don't think there's going to be any worry there. Most of the actors were good, and there's so many actors, of course. They don't all get a whole bunch of screen time, or else it would have been a 6-hour movie. So yeah, like I say, 92 out of 100. There's just not too much wrong with this movie.
This is one I talked about in my May video for the first half of May. So the short version. This is wonderful and also awful at the same time. If you try to evaluate this as a standalone film, you'll find it to be a very shallow, stupid, vapid exploration of ideas that are half-baked and not really explored, because they pack all that in the other 17 or 18 movies before this. If you want to count Ant-Man, it's technically not important to this movie, or to the MCU at large. It's Ant-Man. I mean, it's Ant-Man. It's not important. So basically, they pack all the character development and setting up their origin and their motivations and the world and all this stuff is in, 30 some other hours worth of film to go watch. So it fails as a standalone movie, just because otherwise this would have to be like 8 hours long, and no one's going to sit through an 8-hour long comic book movie. Not even me. I'm not going to sit through an 8-hour comic book film. I'll sit through Salt and Tango, which is, 7 hours long and is mostly a bunch of like 20-minute shots of water glasses randomly. But that's a different show for a different time. But as a culmination of 17 or 18, if you do count Ant-Man films, this thing is as good as it could be. So however you want to take that, you can take that. If that means it's great or not, take it as you want. This is about as good as it probably could have possibly been without a even more bloated runtime or cutting out some extraneous stuff like, okay, we don't really need Black Widow here. We don't really need the entire Cap's exiled plot here. So, okay, we can cut that and explain more of who the heck Vision is, because that wasn't super explained in Avengers Age of Ultron, but, you know, anywho. So there's some stuff you could have done there to maybe make this more coherent as a standalone, but none of that's necessary because this thing does work terrifically as a ensemble piece, essentially. You know, and as I've said, the ending is one that, depending on how much of it they leave canonical, will be very, very intriguing. If they leave everything we see on screen completely canonical, I'll be very fascinated with where the MCU would go after that. It'd be an interesting new direction for certain. So you know, so my evaluation of this is somewhat incomplete because I do need to see the companion piece to this in next year with the still as of yet untitled Avengers 4. We'll see where we go from there. But currently, this is great. In a year, my opinion might strengthen or weaken depending on that one. But as for now, this is as great as it could have been.
Next up for me, an older movie, Deadpool. This is the first one. This is the origin story of the former Special Forces operative turned mercenary Wade Wilson. Yes. He was subjected to a rogue experiment that left him with accelerated healing powers. Okay. And he adopts the alter ego Deadpool. All right. For me, you know, I wasn't expecting much from this movie, but it was surprisingly good. At least surprisingly for me. Most of you maybe not. I gave it an 89 out of 100. The humor starts early and continues throughout the entire movie. Many of the jokes there that Deadpool pulls off, they're very good, but a few of them do fall flat. Not a surprise. But Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool is marvelous. His romantic interest, who is played by Marina Baccarin, is good. It's not great in this one, but the romance part of the movie is actually good. The plot, it's pretty normal. You know, it's too normal for me to make it a classic film, but it's a really good film that certainly deserved to have a sequel or maybe 2 or 3. We'll see. As I said, 89 out of 100.
Mm-hmm. This is one I've talked about multiple times. If you want to go digging, you can go find our Best of 2016 Films episode where I discussed this one then. Also talked about it again in the first half of May video. And yeah, it's very good. It does still hold up, though some of it does fall a little flat after, 4 or 5 watchings. But a little bit of it, most of the origin story part is just a little tedious because, I know all this information. Can we get through this, please? Which at least is nice if they cut it up, that they don't just do, okay, here's a half hour of origin and then here's an hour of fun. We're going to go, here's 10 fun, now 10 minutes of origin. Back to 10 more minutes of modern fun, 10 minutes of origin again. So that's at least nice. They cut that up for the first, 40 minutes to an hour or so. The jokes all work. I don't really remember too many falling flat. This is one that depends less so than its sequel, which I have a feeling we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. This is one that depends less upon you having a great knowledge of everything going on in the comic book film universe The second one relies upon you having seen like literally everything and knowing the ins and outs of film criticism and stuff, which we'll get into in a minute. But the first one doesn't. It does rely upon you kind of having cursory knowledge of the X-Men universe at large a little bit. And that's really it. And a general pop culture awareness is what the first one's jokes all rely upon. As you said, the story is very generic, although that is the point, as that's part of the point that Deadpool likes to point out all of these tropes, but then still use them anywho for his own gain, because it's, well, sometimes we have to, or the story will be either super long and make no sense, or it'll just be really, really stupid. So we have to use these tropes, even though we're going to make fun of the tropes while we use them, which is a very hard and incredible balance to achieve. So the first one is very good, and we'll talk about the second one here in a few minutes. Or I will, at least.
How'd you know? Yes, next up, Deadpool 2.
Yes, of course, Deadpool 2 here, the famous plot of after surviving a near-fatal bovine attack, a disfigured cafeteria chef known as Wade Wilson struggles to fulfill his dream of becoming Mayberry's hottest bartender, while also learning to cope with his lost sense of taste. Searching to regain his spice for life as well as a flux capacitor, Wade must battle ninjas, the Yakuza, and a pack of sexually aggressive canines as he journeys around the world to discover the importance of family, friendship, and flavor, finding a new taste for adventure and earning the coveted coffee mug title of World's Best Lover.
Okay.
That was the plot summary released initially when this was announced. That's not the actual plot, but that was the initial plot summary given about the film.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Deadpool 2. I gave it a 93. We just saw this about a week ago. It continues on as the original Deadpool. We have Wade Wilson once again as Deadpool, or Wade Wilson. Ryan
Reynolds as Wade Wilson.
As Wade Wilson,
who was also
AKA Deadpool. There we go. He brings together a team of fellow mutant rogues to protect a young boy with supernatural abilities from the brutal time-traveling cyborg Cable.
Of course, that's not actually the plot either, but
Deadpool likes to break the fourth wall a lot, and most of the time it's pretty funny when he does. Even in the commercials for the movie, he does. This movie is way, way, way over the top. I did give it a 93 out of 100, though. I mean, I think it's a really great movie. The humor is outstanding. Deadpool's a superhero that I could get behind and like. He's funny. He's witty. He
swears a lot, makes a lot of sex jokes. He's super violent.
Yeah.
All your favorite things.
All my favorite things. The fight scenes are really well done, though. They are the part that's way over the top, too, because, of course, with his super healing ability, it's kind of ridiculous, but oh well. We do have a Winnie the Pooh scene, per se. Yes. And not many movies, take themselves in this kind of way. I mean, this one pokes fun at itself and its genre.
It's genre.
It's genre. It's characters.
We've been drinking some dinner.
Yes. And not many movies can do that and be successful. This one is, one of the best ones I can think of. It's just a good movie. Go check it out. If you don't like a whole bunch of vulgar stuff and things, then this probably would not be for you. But it is rated R, so they let you know up front.
So this is the one I've not gotten to talk about yet. That'll be, I guess, this Sunday night probably. Anywho, this is, a hilarious romp through superhero tropes, as well as a somewhat standard X-Men story. In general, okay, here's this new mutant we have to go find and help save from the evil, intrepid governmental forces and whatnot. The jokes are higher volume and also higher quality than the original film. This one, though, does rely upon you having in and out knowledge of most comic book adaptations, the impact of criticisms leveled at those properties. There's a lot of jokes about DC films in here that you have to, understand what the DC films are and the various criticisms leveled at the DC films to fully get the jokes in theory. In theory, at least, you have to. Maybe you don't. I don't know for sure. I don't have that perspective, so couldn't tell you if they still work without that perspective. As well as having a generally very attuned pop culture knowledge too. For some of the jokes in here, there's references to Frozen, there's references to Yentl, to Interview with the Vampire, plays like a whole 2-minute bit about that, so there's a lot of random things that you may or may not get. Like that. The action scenes here are very terrific, as you would expect, coming from David Leitch here after John Wick and Atomic Blonde. You'd expect great action sequences. He delivers those. And then one thing I rarely credit films for, because usually, there's not really much to credit them on for this, but the opening credit sequence is wonderful. One of the better ones in recent memory here. Not something you usually get to say about films, commend them on their opening credit sequence, but this one you do.
When you don't take them seriously.
Right. And of course the post-credit sequence is one for the ages, really, here. As Deadpool goes through and rights all of the wrongs that the comic universe has done to him, whether killing off his girlfriend at the start of the movie, which basically invalidates the whole point of the movie, but whatever. That's part of what comics does in general, is it retcons things previously, like, oh yeah, Peter Parker has radioactive semen. Oh no, he doesn't. Don't worry. Retcon all kind of things that are very important for 2 years, and it's, oh yeah, no, that never happened, people, so forget the last 2 years. So it does that, and then of course rights the wrongs of the original film appearance of Deadpool and X-Men Origins Wolverine, which we all know that by now, the disaster that was, and then rights the wrong of the entirety of the making of the Green Lantern movie, which is also one we all are very well aware of at this point. Even if you haven't seen it, you're well aware Green Lantern is an awful, awful movie. And in between all of these jokes and one-liners and random sight gags, the story actually manages to put in some surprisingly poignant emotional beats every now and then in between all of these jokes and sight gags. So wonderfully done.
Yes. Now we'll get to a couple that I like that someone else in the room does not like. First up, Rampage, starring Dwayne Johnson once again. If he's not in everything, he's in most everything. I gave it a 92 out of 100. This one's a video game adaptation, which is very, slim.
Very loose.
Very adaptation. Since the game wasn't much, but, it actually works. This movie was action-packed, and for me, that helps keep up my interest. So we're given 3 huge creatures to get rid of to save the world. And, of course, we got Dwayne Johnson The Rock to do the saving, of course. I think there's a beautiful backstory to the gorilla and Dwayne Johnson, and it shows the length that some people will go through to help their friends. Jeffrey Dean Morgan, he's a bit over the top in his part, but he was the guy that saved him, or he gave him the helicopter. He was the guy that fought the military. That dude,
the cowboy.
Yeah, he was a bit over the top in his part, I thought, but it added a bit of humor to the film. We don't get to see the fox and alligator type creatures too much, and not really like close up and great stuff, but that's okay. They're well done when we do get to see them. Overall, for me, this is a good film, and to me, I think you should certainly see it if you are into action movies. So that's me, 92 out of 100 for this Rampage.
All right. Well, I already burned this one down to the ground once back in the first half of May video, but I'm happy to do it again, and I will definitely be doing it again in a month. With our worst of the year so far. Let me find it. Let me find this thing. Oh, it's actually not in my 10 worst anymore. Nice. Yeah, it's not. What knocked it out? Oh, I think Ready Player One, actually. No, Red Sparrow knocked it out. Sorry. Anywho, so this is still awful, though. This is a deeply stupid, pointless excuse for a movie, if you even want to call it that. Same thing goes for the plot. There's nothing remotely interesting about it, if you can even be generous enough to call it a plot. All the fight scenes with the monsters go exactly as you expect it to. These are, unkillable, invincible entities, basically. So there's nothing interesting about the fights, because it's like, well, nothing's going to work. So what's the point? This is not remotely entertaining, and it takes itself miles too seriously to be fun. This isn't Godzilla. This isn't the good Godzillas, the Japanese ones, nor is this Gamera, which is, well, they know this is silly and stupid, so they're going to just be silly and make it part of the appeal, is that these are insanely silly. But this takes itself super seriously, thinks it's some super heightened, tight, tense character drama, when really all this is a ridiculous excuse for The Rock to attempt to fight a giant crocodile, essentially here. And then the other big issue here, they couldn't even bother to come up with interesting creature designs. You have the ape, so okay, you stole King Kong, great. You have the wolf guy, which is you literally stole Varan from Godzilla, who is a wolf-like creature with porcupine spines and wings that flies. So you literally stole the wolf from Godzilla, and then the crocodile is like 90% of Anguirus, also from the Godzilla franchise. So you aren't even smart enough or creative enough, which I know this is Brad Payton, right?
He was the director.
Yeah, this is Brad Payton. So I know you're not, Brad, I know you're not creative or anything. I watched San Andreas. I know you're not very creative. So, I get that you're not smart enough to come up with interesting creatures, but this is remotely stunning lack of creativity for you. I mean, this is just genetic engineering plot from like the Gareth Edwards Godzilla with, mixed with the Americanized kaiju junk from, well, really nothing. I mean, Pacific Rim's the closest, but that's fun. That's the big difference. This is essentially a watered down, unfun Pacific Rim. So Pacific Rim 2, but it's its own thing, because it's not giant robots fighting giant demon monsters. It's The Rock fighting a giant demon monster. So It's not fun. It's not entertaining. It's just an atrocious pile of garbage. So do not watch this. If you do, you will walk out of the theater or walk away from your television set. I don't even know if this is still in theaters at this point. But you will walk away with a massive headache and from both the assault of noise as well as the complete idiocy of the entire movie will just leave your brain in such mush that you won't really be able to comprehend what you just watched, because there is nothing to comprehend with this. It's just The Rock trying to fight a giant crocodile for 2 hours, and that's the last 10 minutes. The first hour and 15 minutes is the most boring, insipid, idiotic, generic, government, not even government agency, private corporation is trying to build a very weird super weapon that does not work the way they think it will, and now the military is going to try and stop them, which goes horribly. Which that's the other thing I'd like to mention. The plan these villains have, I don't understand what their goal is. So they're building a gene weapon that is going to turn animals into violent, gigantic killing machines. So what's their goal? Annihilate the whole human race?
Well,
there's much easier ways to go about that, I would think.
You would think so. Funner ways, I guess.
Well, I guess, but there's a lot easier ways to kill a bunch of people. Just walk down your local Walmart, buy an assault rifle, and then you can go murder a bunch of folks.
Yes. But that doesn't make a good movie, so.
I mean, this doesn't either, but they still made it. So that's really their plan, is to kill the whole human race by genetically engineering animals to become violent, unstoppable killing machines. I don't really get their point here. I don't really know how that's supposed to work, but whatever. Don't bother yourself with this thing. It's not even a movie. Don't bother yourself with this assault on your brain.
All righty.
What would you like me to rail next?
Next?
Is it what I hope it is?
Probably. The next two movies are by the same director, Steven Spielberg.
Oh, yay. Okay, which one do I get to rail first?
The first one is Ready Player One.
Oh, good. This one I have more to say about.
Okay.
You
I
go
give
first.
this one an 83 out of 100. This is a simple plot, kind of. In the year 2045, people escape their harsh reality in the Oasis. That's an immersive virtual world where you can go anywhere, do anything, be anyone. The only limits are your own imagination. So, okay. Apparently, the creator of this place has left an immense fortune, and control of the Oasis goes to the winner of a contest designed to find a worthy heir. So, since this is a big super duper thing, you know, the corporations are going to try and cheat, of course, because there's no way they're going to let some little 15 or 20-year-old win. And this movie's nearly 2.5 hours. It's a bit long. Cut out about 20 minutes, and this would be a more fantastic movie. There's a lot of references to the 80s. Which aren't always correct. But they've been changed probably to make it more exciting in the movie. Spoiler alert here. At the end of this movie, there's an Easter egg in the video game Adventure, which was one of the first ones. And in this movie, they make it, oh boy, like it's, you know, you go get this pixel, you carry it around, and you go to a secret room and all this stuff. And well, in reality, all it was a secret room that when you entered showed the developer's name, and yeah, that's all it was. It wasn't much of an Easter egg, but it wasn't very exciting, so they changed it for the movie, of course. There is little others in this, the high five group. To me, the CGI is great. It's a good plot, which seems to be true to life, as I said, kind of. Yes, an evil corporation. They hire thousands of players, all because, of course, they want to control this fortune.
I must cut in here.
Okay.
The Wikipedia page for Adventure on the Atari 2600 lays out how the Easter egg is done. And from what I remember of the movie's explanation, they are 100% factually accurate.
Okay.
Let's see. Within Adventure, the Easter egg is located inside the Black Castle catacombs on difficulty level 2 or 3, embedded in the south wall of a sealed chamber accessible only via a bridge. There is an invisible 1-pixel object referred to as the gray dot. The player must bounce the avatar along the bottom wall to pick up the dot. Bringing this dot to the east end of the corridor below the yellow castle, while other differently colored objects are present, causes the wall object to become invisible, allowing the player to pass in a room displaying the words created by Warren Robinette. So from what I remember, that sounds the exact same as the movie. You have to go to some specific area, picks up a little 1-pixel item, carry it back to another spot, and then you can go in this room. That sounds exactly the same to me.
Yes, but that room in the movie is a lot more exciting than just showing the developer's name.
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But I could be wrong, but I don't think so.
The crazy CEO is played quite well by Ben Mendelsohn.
Mm-hmm.
There's not, a lot of substance in this movie. There's lots more visual appeal. But, I found the movie entertaining, and that's why I go to the movies. So I gave it an 83 out of 100.
Well, you nailed down the problem here. There is no substance to this movie. This is stupid, tedious, pointless. I will state firsthand, I did read the book because I heard the book was really good before I saw the movie. So I did read the book. I will say I like the movie more than I liked the book.
Okay.
Mostly on the front that the book is very creepy and also has like a 1.5 page discussion of the health benefits of masturbation, which are both absent from the movie. So on that basis alone, I must give the fact that the movie is better than the book. Both are still heinous pieces of garbage. The movie is better, slightly better. Now, I will say this is quite possibly the worst film I have ever given a lot of critical thought to. As I rationaled out a couple ways this movie could possibly be improved greatly. So, with what is actually presented here, this is awful. It ultimately should be about how technology and video games are the ultimate escape from a horrible reality. Unfortunately, they don't go this route whatsoever, as eventually they settle on that no matter how awful our reality is, no matter how awful our lives are, we need to turn off the internet and go and explore our awful reality that is actively trying to kill us. That's essentially what the movie settles on. And also, I must say, The Oasis is one of the most stunningly idiotic games I've ever heard of. It's not a game. I mean, it's essentially a VR experience version of the entirety of the internet. That's literally all it is. It's just the internet that you can walk through. That's literally all it is. I will also say that these challenges or whatever that you have to solve, they simplify them a lot for the movie compared to what the books were, to the point where it is so insane that no one has figured these out yet. Like, literally, no one has ever before attempted to drive backwards in the race. Really? That's going to be like the first thing someone does. Like you do that all the time, like with Mario Kart. One of the first things people love to do is, can I finish the race by driving backwards the whole time? That's literally one of the first things people do. And it's taken them 3.5 years for one person to try it.
Yeah.
Really? That is so. Either the entire human race are completely idiotic, which the way this film is presented seems likely, or no one knows how video games work, which seems to also be the case with, especially with Steven Spielberg involved. I'd be shocked if he knows how video games work.
Well,
so
probably not.
The entirety of the movie is just so stupid because it's all on that level. It's like, really? That's something any basic gamer is going to do just for their own random enjoyment, is going to try to drive backwards through a race. You know, in the book, it was something insane. Like they have to go to some random planet, travel down this like 8-mile long shaft, and then face a giant skeleton in a game of Joust. Like that at least sounds difficult and hard to find. You know, going backwards in a race is so mind-bogglingly simple that I can't believe that it takes 3 years for one person to try it. So insane.
Okay.
The ending of this is just so awful too. As you know, Wade and his crew, you know, they win billions upon billions of dollars by completing this stupid thing, right? But instead of using this to better the entirety of the world's reality, what do? They buy themselves a cool apartment with a bunch of random junk that they like, of properties they like. So wait, you're now multi-billionaires. Your only moves, as far as the film's concerned, is buy yourself a new place with some cool stuff you like in it. Okay, fair enough. I could understand that one. Fair enough. But then the only other thing you do is you turn off the internet for 2 days a week. You don't do anything to like, I'm going to build new housing for everyone in, you know, this country, or I'm going to buy food for a year for the starving children of some country. Or no, we don't do any of that. No, geez. What, you think these are good people that we're focusing on? No, these are atrocious human beings who are complete and utter idiots. Now, I will say there was one part I liked. That was when they do The Shining, when they go inside The Shining. This was the only part that felt fun and entertaining in the way the whole movie is trying to be. It's also, you know, take this as you will, it's also the part that feels the least Spielberg-y, for sure. You know, it legitimately feels like I'm in someone else's movie, that I'm not watching a Spielberg movie anymore. It feels like I'm watching someone else. It feels like I'm watching a Chris Nolan movie. So take that for what you will, but the best part of this movie is the bit where we're not watching a Spielberg movie anymore, basically. Now, I did think of a couple ways this movie could be better. If this whole thing is framed as a horror film, this would be a lot better, because the idea of this movie is that in the 2040s, right? Okay, so in the 2040s, the entire culture of the world is reset to basically 1989. Pop culture stops there, except for like 3 things that I remember, which is there's like a Minecraft thing, there's the Halo Spartan Troopers show up, and there was something else that I forget now that was post like 89. But like the entirety of this world is set in like 1989 and previous pop culture, with obvious omissions. Like there's no Star Wars reference. So the world that this posits is that nothing post 1990 is worth remembering or important in any way, unless it is either a Spielberg property, then it is, because there's Iron Giant in here. That's post 90, but it's Spielberg, so it's important. But other than Halo, Minecraft, and Spielberg properties, nothing past 1990 is worth remembering or important in any way. I know that's the reality a lot of like 50 and older people live in, but that is an awful idea. That is an awful world. Because essentially, then, like if you think about it in the modern context, it's all of a sudden we all get very obsessed with and start wanting to live and only live in the 1950s. Like that would just be insane.
Yes.
No one would like that, pretty much, except for like 80-year-olds.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's fine. But then there's, you know, billions of other people who it's, you know, awful. And this is just talking pop culturally, not even, you know, as far as actual reality goes. But, you know, that's a different entity in the movie that we don't want to address in the movie because then it might be interesting. So we don't want to talk about the actual reality that this world is set in, because that might lead to something interesting. But that's terrifying. So if they frame this as a horror film where either, I forget his name now, but the idiot who creates the Oasis and dies, whatever his name was, if he is framed as a villain, this could be near genius level filmmaking here. Because then he single-handedly killed all of pop culture past 1990. That would be an incredible stroke of brilliance if he is a giant villain instead of this heroic Christ figure that we get, where everyone should strive to be like him because he's such a brilliant genius or whatever. Like, if we took it as he's a villain, this could be really good because he single-handedly destroys 60 years of culture, of music, of movies, of video gaming, of TV. There's hardly anything television related in this movie anyway, as far as I could see. You know, there's no like, they don't bring up like where they go to the Cheers bar to drink or something. Now, granted, they're like 20, but still. You'd think like if you're going to reference the 80s a bunch, that'd be a logical one. Like, okay, we're going to go head into Cheers to grab us a Coke or something. Like, nope. Probably too expensive to get those rights, huh?
Yeah.
We spent all our money on getting Mechagodzilla and getting the DeLorean from Back to the Future, which I guess that's kind of Spielberg property, sort of, right? A little bit. I think he produced that. I forget off the top of my head.
Thinking he might have, yeah.
Okay, but we spent all our money on getting Mechagodzilla, on getting the bike from Akira, on getting the Spartan Troopers from Halo, on getting Minecraft. We spent all our money on that. We can't possibly afford to get a recreation of the Cheers set. So, but like, you know, that this guy single-handedly destroys all of it. That would be an interesting idea. Of course, we don't want to talk about that because then it's like Spielberg has to acknowledge that stuff other than his own work is important, which, yeah, I don't see him wanting to do that. So I must also admit, you know, this is much better than the book, as I said. You know, the book for, you know, it's like the way I non-nicefully have described it before is essentially it's Ernest Cline masturbating about his own nerdiness for 350 pages, basically, is what it reads as. The movie is considerably better than that, just largely because I don't get that feeling from it. Thankfully, that'd be an odd thought about Spielberg to have. Anywho, the other way I found this to be maybe interesting is if not necessarily the dude that created the thing's painted as a villain, but if our main character, if Wade something or other is the villain of the story. If he is the villain just due to his own selfish motivations here, where his only motivation here is to get this chick and to become rich, and that's his sole motivations. If we paint him as a villain, this film becomes intensely more interesting, Same thing if we point the creator of the Oasis as a villain. This would make a real interesting horror film, kind of. The other way you could have made this even more interesting, I think, is if you took it as a political allegory. Basically, if you took it the way Black Panther is taken by most serious individuals, and if you take it in that way of the intrepid forces of the universe, this guy who creates the Oasis, as wanting to revert us culturally to 60 years ago, and how that's a bad idea. If you explore it in that direction, it would be a very fascinating political allegory for current political times. Now, granted, it wouldn't age very well in that regard, but the other thing is this thing as it's presented is not going to age well whatsoever, because in 10, 15 years, no one's going to get half these references anymore, which is a big issue when, your core demographic with this film is already 50-year-olds who are the ones who care about these things. Like, no 20-year-old is going to go in here probably and go, "Oh yeah, man, did you get that Buckaroo Banzai reference? Oh man, Buckaroo Banzai is super cool." I don't know why it's a 90s kid now, but like, this is aimed at like 50-year-olds, and in 15, 20 years, yeah, they might enjoy this film still when they're in their 70s or 80s, but no modern audience at that time is probably going to appreciate this. This is not going to age remotely well, I don't think, unlike Spielberg's other movies that, from 40 years ago now are still at their worst, decent at the worst. This is awful and is probably going to age out to be even worse than it looks right now. And I honestly do not understand why people like this. I really don't. Because even if you're going to go this is fun and entertaining route, like, I can make the argument it's not particularly fun or entertaining because the whole time it's hinting at these other ideas reality is a dystopian wasteland, basically. Or, the culture has been reset 60 years or something. Like, it's hinting at these other ideas. And at least for me, I'm sitting there watching it like, they're having this big giant battle, but wait, what were you talking about? The world is a giant wasteland. Can we see that movie? Please, that would be real interesting. So it's just such awful. Other than like he had to direct like 20 minutes of the movie, and because the rest is all CG, so maybe that was it. He's like, I only have to work for like 2 weeks. Okay, sure, I'll do it. I'll take my $20 million for my 2 weeks of work. Sure. Other than that, I don't know why he did it. I don't really get why people like this in the slightest. So stay away from this. Please do not bother with this thing. So I believe that will do it for this episode of Unspooled there after my nice 20, 30-minute rant on Ready Player One. So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more great content like this. And until the next episode, goodbye.